What would it take to arouse your life, to experience more connection, more pleasure, more realness, in and outside of the bedroom? I'm August McLaughlin, and this is Girl Boner Radio. What is it like dating or having sex with someone who's neurodivergent? What about cultivating intimacy as a neurodivergent person? How can you have a fun, gratifying sex life when dysregulation, rejection sensitivity, distraction, or having zero filter enter the picture? Today's stories touch on all of this. Neurodivergence is a term used to describe a brain that processes information differently than the masses. It's a topic queer sex educator Emily Zawadski specializes in, particularly since meeting her now wife. Early on, Emily's sexuality journey started with unanswered curiosity.
Honestly, from a very just kind of like sociological standpoint, I've always really found sex and just the human body to be very fascinating. I was always asking questions and trying to find out more. One time I was younger playing doctor with one of the neighborhood boys and I was maybe like 10 or 11 and it was at a daycare actually. So it was the daycare provider that had caught us and was kind of dealing with the situation. And what I remember was that like for me, that experience was not something that was like sexual or pleasurable in nature. It was very much just like, wow, we have very different bodies and like, what the heck is that thing? And mine feels like this. And why does yours feel like that? So I really couldn't understand when we got caught, like why we were getting in trouble. Why is this such a bad thing? And I remember I had so many questions about the body and like what we were discovering at the time. And they were all going unanswered, whereas he maybe had some questions as well, but those were getting answered. So it was kind of like telling me, you're not even allowed to be interested or curious in this topic, especially as a girl, but like that didn't stop me from turning it into a full-on career. So
We'll get to that in a bit. Today, Emily identifies as a lesbian.
But I was raised Catholic. So there was a lot of, I feel like, mixed messages growing up of like what was allowed to be in relationships and sex. I did start to become aware of my attraction to girls maybe at like 15 or so. I remember like Katy Perry's I Kissed a Girl song had just come out. And while it's like, it hasn't maybe aged finely, at the time, it did kind of like give me almost like an excuse to explore that. I just realized like I was really into kissing girls.
When Emily was in university in 2012, she officially came out.
And I remember at the time actually like really only saying that like I like girls. Like I wasn't really giving myself a label at the time because I didn't really know what was going to fit me. So after some soul searching, like I did realize that I'm a lesbian and I also identify as a femme lesbian at that.
For folks who aren't familiar with the term femme, how would you describe that for yourself?
So for me, it's both aesthetic as well as kind of political. And in an aesthetic sense, it's just any person who likes quote unquote very stereotypically like girlier kind of things and who likes to express their gender in a more feminine way, which I do. But also for me, it is a political thing in the sense that in my experience, femme lesbians have either been hypersexualized by society and or completely erased, like they're just gal pal things, right? So for me, holding on to that identity is even more like gives me almost like power and strength in it to be like, yes, I am feminine. I am just as dykey as the rest of them. And that's how I like to show up in the world and take up space in the world.
Emily wasn't looking for a serious relationship when she met her would-be wife, Emily. So you'll hear me call Emily's wife her nickname, Moose.
We actually met online. We did meet on Tinder, classic. I was coming out of a really hard breakup at the time. So I was actually really only looking for like sex and more of a physical connection. And Emily had recently come out and hadn't really yet had like a whole lot of sexual or romantic experiences with women, just like a handful. We were like talking a little bit just to kind of like get to know each other kind of thing. But it was under the premise that like for the first time we actually like met in person, she came over to my house and it was like under the pretense of a hookup. Yes. And we did hook up. But it was interesting because when we first started having sex, it wasn't the greatest of sex. For her, it was extremely dysregulating. So with like crying and panic attacks, and I like didn't understand why my partner was like distracted or having these panic attacks and crying when we were having sex. And like they were taking us both really out of the moment. We didn't really know like what was happening. We're dealing with this interesting situation sexually, kind of like behind closed doors, if you will. But romantically, as we're like starting to date and get to know each other, everything is going so great. Like we're realizing we have similar values, what we have in common. We had a first summer together. We did so much like fun adventuring, and it's honestly still one of my favorite memories of our relationship. And we've been together like for 7 years now. But it was interesting because we were trying to navigate what was kind of going wrong sexually. Like we really could have like chalked it up to not being sexually compatible or like something like that and just kind of moved on. But like then I would have missed out on the love of my life, right? So I'm glad that we didn't do that.
For a while, though, sex remained challenging for the couple. An experience that stands out for Emily happened after their first Pride together.
We were feeling the vibe, having a good time being amongst other queer folks. We got back to the Airbnb all riled up and ready to go. And yeah, midway through, I can just kind of tell that she's starting to feel off, maybe feeling a little bit distracted, starting to get a little bit quiet. Like, what's wrong? Is there anything I can do to help you? We didn't really know what we were dealing with. So she had a harder time communicating what was happening. All I remember is that she was just like crying to the point where like when I was asking her about it, she was becoming more dysregulated, and to the point where she actually had to leave the Airbnb for a moment.
That was both a learning moment, she said, and a really tricky one.
Because I'm someone who I like to solve things as quickly as I can, because otherwise my anxiety kind of gets the best of me sometimes. But that was like a learning moment where she realized in the moment, like, I think it's actually better if we take a pause, come down from maybe that high energy dysregulation a little bit, and then can come back to better support and talk about things from a more like clear-headed kind of space where we can actually talk about things without having them like take over the conversation, basically.
A couple of years into the relationship, Moose started seeing content on social media, especially TikTok, about ADHD, and she really related to a lot of it. So she shared her revelations with Emily, and they looked into it together.
We were like, no, there's a lot here actually that could be ticked off. So she brought it to her therapist, and they started basically the process of like diagnosing. I was actually a part of that. Like I had to fill out like a questionnaire survey type thing as the partner, and to kind of help the doctor reflect on, or the therapist, I guess, reflect on like what her behaviors were and what her thinking was like. They took some people of like her inner circle to kind of use for like diagnosing.
Once Moose was officially diagnosed with ADHD, a lot of things clicked.
There was a lot of like, ah, yes, like that all makes sense.
Around the same time, Emily realized with her own therapist that she's a highly sensitive person, or HSP.
And there is a bit of overlap between the two. I'd say like a lot of people who are ADHD have a lot of HSP traits, but it doesn't like go vice versa. Like not everyone who is HSP has ADHD kind of thing.
With Moose having an ADHD brain, which tends to bring high sensitivity, and Emily being highly sensitive herself, they were able to channel some of those deep emotions and care into supporting each other.
Kind of like we're understanding each other a little bit more emotionally.
That changed how they communicated, especially around sex and intimacy. The most helpful thing, said Emily, was learning about rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD.
Which is basically like a heightened emotional sensitivity to things like criticism, rejection, failure, things like that. She realized that she was feeling that like RSD, that rejection sensitivity dysphoria, that was stemming from feeling like she had like a lack of confidence and like a lack of experience from being newly out and like not having been with a lot of women.
And when Emily would try to help their sex issues, her well-intended suggestions felt to Moose like rejection.
During sex, like what were helpful pointers, or just like regular sex talk, like move to the left, or, you know, like that kind of thing. She was actually taking that as sexual criticism. And so then therefore, like how I was used to communicating my pleasure to partners, like she wasn't really getting that. And so it was leading her to thinking that like she was letting me down or not doing a good job or not performing well. And that was basically just like making her nervous system a mess and dysregulating her to the point where, yeah, she was like distracted or crying and sometimes just not even experiencing arousal anymore.
Once they understood what was happening, Emily and Moose could change their approach and their communication to improve things.
We've kind of had to like stop and check in sometimes so I can like maybe be a little bit more reassuring with her that like I may be needing something specific for her in that from her in that moment, or just like reassuring that like, hey, like everything's okay. I'm actually in my own head because of this stuff. And maybe you could help support me through that by doing this, and just making sure like letting her know that it's not that something that she's doing wrong. It's just something that like I maybe need help with.
Moose has learned ways to communicate her needs to Emily during sex when she's dysregulated as well.
What she does now, what she tries to do is like put me in like a hug or give me like a little handhold, tight squeeze, and say, I'm just taking a moment. I will be right back in 5 minutes, like puts a time kind of thing on it. And then says we can come back and we can discuss like when I'm back. I just need to basically like come down for a moment. And so I think that was really big because she now has a tool at her disposal that she can use. And it's also something that we can communicate about that helps both of us in the moment. When you're anxious or when you're dysregulated or experiencing RSD or all of the above, it's really hard to kind of access those tools and just kind of the words that you want to use to communicate and express yourself in a better, efficient way, or in a way that you know your partner's going to respond better to. And so, yeah, I think that's really helped us to kind of lean into those things a little bit more.
Just like all types of brains, the ADHD, or otherwise neurodivergent brain, brings mighty strengths. And really, the challenges are all about a lack of understanding, resources, and/or support. Emily and Moose have worked one of Moose's neurodivergent traits, known as stimming, into their intimacy in this beautiful, creative way.
We kind of just stumbled upon it, actually. So stimming is the repetition of certain like physical movements or vocalizations. It's also like a really calming activity that they can do. And Emily really likes her stimming. So she has fidget spinners. She usually needs something in her hands to kind of keep her occupied and help her calm and kind of just regulated, I'd say, for the most part. One thing we've done recently is we've tried to incorporate her stimming like as a way of intimacy, actually. So for me, I feel so like intimate and loved by my partner, like when she's touching me, whether we're holding hands or her hand is on my leg or something. So lately, she's just been like trying to incorporate like her stimming, like just somehow like on my body. So if we're in the car driving and like my hand is on her leg, she'll do like her stimming on my hand kind of thing. Or like if we're cuddling and she has like an arm wrapped around me, she is doing it on my back or something like that. So it's been kind of really nice because she's letting out these physical stims and like calming herself and keeping herself regulated and like mindful in the moment. And I'm also feeling very loved and closer to her. So it's kind of been like a win-win, actually.
Emily shared a practice related to her story that I think we can all learn from. I'll share that near the end of the episode. First, here's another story. Kat, a mother of 4 in Missouri who asked to stay anonymous, talked to me about her own experience as someone with another type of neurodivergence.
I have Asperger's. So like I can look into this camera lens because it's not a person, but I can't look at you on the screen. In fact, I have you pushed down a little bit. Not that you're not gorgeous, but I don't like to look people in the eye. I also suffer with some pretty deep depression. We vacillate on whether or not it's depression or it might be complex PTSD, but for the most part, no matter which it is, I have it pretty under control.
Here's how she described Asperger's syndrome, which is considered part of the autism spectrum.
Some people call it a disorder, but it just means my brain doesn't process feelings the same way you do. Like my brain's just wired differently. I was determined to not be typical at the age of 2.5 because I didn't show the emotion other kids did. Other kids, like they follow their parents around. They get super excited when their parents like come back. I was just off in my own little world playing with stuff. They thought maybe I had some sort of speech problem or maybe even a hearing problem at first because I just had no inclination to talk. And then one day I just said like 3 or 4 sentences perfectly. And they were like, oh, that sounds more like Asperger's. In very small children, but it tends to seem like you have next to no interest in interacting with other people. And what it actually is you tunnel visionly focus on one thing and you go straight for that thing. So these other people talking to you, you're like, that's great. I've got stuff to do. These blocks will not build themselves. People think I'm so robotic, but like I also cry in corners very frequently. I have no filter. Well, I have some nylon bag. That's what I call it.
Stretchy and see-through.
Yeah, exactly. Stretchy and see-through. It catches stuff sometimes. I like to say it catches the bigger stuff. But I have next to no filter. So like I hurt people's feelings very frequently and I don't mean to. I will just say something and it sounds so harsh, but I didn't mean it in a harsh way. A good example is my son. My son's also has Asperger's and I'm fat. I use that as a descriptor, not like putting myself down. I'm just saying like if I go missing, please tell the cops like fat Black woman, yay big. It'll help me get found.
Kat's son uses the word fat as a positive or neutral term too.
So he like attributes really happy people with being fat. And so when we go out to stores, sometimes because he's pretty young, he goes up to people and he's just like, you're so fat. And what he means is he likes you. I make being fat not a bad word in this house. It's just a descriptor. It's like saying I'm Black or I have brown eyes. So when he does it to other people, he does not get this. He's trying to say you're like my mom.
Kat's family now calls such blurts when someone says something others deem inappropriate, fat moments.
I tend to say something, maybe I did mean it in a like constructive light, but it comes off so bad. So it's great.
For much of her adult life, Kat found navigating romantic relationships difficult.
Again, that bluntness, like when I go out to conventions and stuff, I know be very guarded, talk very slow because you don't want to hurt the feelings of people who don't know you and don't have subcontext. But then when you get comfortable with someone, that nylon bag you call a filter tends to go away. And that happens really, really quickly with people with Asperger's because, again, we hyper-focus.
An example came up when Kat was talking with a friend.
I was telling her how I end up going to work at night, and she's like, oh, yeah, I end up falling asleep at my computer. I'll start working 30 minutes later. I'm asleep at my desk. And I'm like, that's an interesting problem because I start working, and the next thing I know, it's noon the next day. So when it comes to hyper-focusing in the relationships, if I start focusing on something else and you walk up on me and ask me a question, the bluntest thing, almost like a 90s sitcom, is about to come out of my mouth. So you have to be prepared for that. And that sounds like I'm like, oh yeah, you have to be prepared for it. I'm working on it, but it's not something I really control that much. So that means that I had to work on also getting my partners to understand, like, if I hurt your feelings, stop me, pull me out of that moment so I can apologize and like actually like process through what I'm thinking so that it then makes sense to you and it's not hurtful.
Kat might say, your breath smells bad if you've just had a meal together, for example, not as a judgment, but just as an honest thought that comes blurting out. Or she'll say something about herself while making out that might feel out of place to the partner, like, I just had a bowel movement. When Kat does say something sexy or romantic, it doesn't always land the way a partner would expect. Like telling her partner he's really hot in this flat tone while she looks at the floor.
Again, I don't tend to look people in the eye. So then what I'm saying doesn't feel as genuine to someone who's neurotypical. It can be a challenge, but luckily, because I'm just used to it, I'm able to articulate that to my wife, and my wife gets it. She's like, yeah, you're not going to look me in the eye. Yeah, especially when you're not thinking and you're actually in the middle of an orgasm, some weird stuff will come out. In like these robotic moments when I'm getting off and my brain just goes into, I call it Aspie mode. I remember one time I like just started screaming out, that's that's pleasant. Almost exactly like that. It's just flew out of my mouth. Kind of like some people default to like, oh, daddy, yes, or something. Weird stuff comes out. I don't know why I turned into a chicken. I don't know why it was pleasant, but those were the words that came out. And I remember my wife was eating me out and like her head popped up and she's just like, really? She's like, some weird stuff's happened, but not that. I don't have a reason for why that happened. I've tried thinking it through and that was a great orgasm. It just took me places. And apparently I went somewhere, I went on a farm.
That really took you places.
It
It transported you to another village across the country. Not many people can say that.
And I said it so robotically. And she stopped because she thought I was like messing with her. And I was like, no, wait a minute. And she's like, really? Not judging. She's very supportive. She's amazing. So caring and so stinking sweet. She's a rock star. Nope. I said I'm going to stop saying I don't deserve her. But she's fabulous. The other side of the coin is being very blunt is I have no poker face. So like if I'm feeling something and I'm like really like happy, I cry. If I'm really sad, I cry. I just cry all the time. I usually cry more so because I'm happy because I'm just overjoyed. And so people think it's fake, which has made it to where some relationships crumbled because they thought it was fake and I meant it. So like even in like moments where like one should try to keep it together, it's hard to do that. Also, because of Asperger's, I can't differentiate someone with ill intent towards me. I really am that child that gets in the van with candy. As an adult, it's not fun to deal with. I've luckily have supportive people around me who will stop me from getting in the van, but I will get in the van with the candy and I will drive off with people. I tend to believe other people are just like me. So if you're telling me you've got oceanfront property in Arizona, I'm probably going to believe you and put together a down payment and Western Union it to you. Yeah, it's fun. It's great. It doesn't make for the best of romantic situations, which is why I'm very grateful for my wife who has done nothing nefarious.
Living with Asperger's has definitely brought Kat and her relationships good things. She pointed out some strengths.
I remember being very, very sad one day because someone did lie to me. And I called my really good friend Shayna and she was like, my heart breaks for you because you get so happy, you're so positive, you're so like ready to believe this person, and then you get let down. She's like, but I've known you for like 20 years now. And she goes, and tomorrow you'll be right back up as if nothing happened. And it's true. Like you can't be this superly overly emotional about everything and not be very resilient, or you wouldn't make it to the age of 33. I do tend to bounce back from disappointment very, very quickly, which has made it to where I'm able to have and find relationships.
The way her brain works and living in a culture that's not always accommodating or understanding of Asperger's have also in some ways led to her meaningful relationship with her wife.
A lot of people, given what I went through, would probably be pretty nihilistic that this is not going to work because nothing ever works. Because who could love the person who's crying because they're happy all the time? Or they say hurtful things when they truly don't mean it just because they don't understand how it hits the ear. But no, because of that, I was able to find the person that I love and have an amazing relationship. And also, tunnel vision is a great thing. I knew I wanted her, and so I was focusing on making sure that like I did not screw this up. So 10 years later, I still haven't screwed it up completely. She's still here.
Oh.
Kat is working on self-acceptance and that self-deprecating humor, she said. But she really is proud of her relationship and of the loving and caring person she herself has evolved to be.
Being different, being neurodivergent has shaped who I became because I was so different. I was always the kid that when I saw people picking on someone, that became my friend. I don't care how weird they are. I don't care what they're into. That person's going to be my friend. I'm always kind of going for the underdog. Like I'm always looking for a sea biscuit is what I tell people. So yeah, I think that really did foster me being willing to listen to different ways of the way people function, if that makes any sense. I became a much happier person when I just said, I'm me. And I kind of actually lead with my Asperger's. When I'm interested in someone, it's one of the first things I tell them. When I see that this is going to develop into some sort of friendship, and then if it's going to go into a relationship, it's one of the first things. My name, my age, my dating status, and then Asperger's. It's right up there because it's a beautiful thing. It's not bad.
So much more becomes possible when we don't shun ourselves and go, oh my gosh, why am I this way?
Yeah, because when I stopped, I'd be like, oh my gosh, you're in your 30s or you're almost 30 years old and you're falling for all of these people who lie to you. It's easy to get down on yourself for the cons of having your neurodivergence. But I've recently started saying, nah, like I'm going to be 60 years old and falling for this stupid stuff, and it's not my fault. We wouldn't be mad at like someone in a wheelchair where there's no ramp and they're trying to like find a way around something. So I refuse to be mad at myself. I can feel sorry if I hurt your feelings. I can feel genuinely sorry and then go eat a pound of ice cream as I'm one to do and cry softly while watching some show that makes me feel guilty. Need to stop that. But I'm not going to beat myself up because I did something that my brain makes me do. I will try to make it better if I mess something up, but I'm me. And like, there's some things that I can't help. And either I'm going to be miserable being myself or I'm going to embrace it and hopefully help other people understand this condition so that then we learn coping mechanisms and how to understand each other better. People don't understand that we're robots, but we're like exceptionally emotional robots. And they're like, that makes no sense. I don't even know how to make it make sense, but it does. Things are very black and white. So like, if you're upset about something, I may not understand how you're upset about it. But if I hurt your feelings, it will hurt me for months. It may have been something where you're over it in like 10 seconds, but I will be ruminating on that forever. It's more of an introspective thing. Like when I get happy, I cry. I start snotball crying like a crazy person. My emotions are they're more amplified. So like, again, if I'm happy, whereas you would be a level 2, I'm a 10. There's really no in between. I see things very black and white. I've learned to acquiesce and understand that there's gray and understand that I'm never going to understand the way you do. It's more of a just accepting that it's gray.
Back in 2020, I spoke with a sex and relationship coach named Rachael Rose about her experience with ADHD and some ways it can impact sex and intimacy. Rachael has the combined type of ADHD, which includes traits of the 2 subtypes known as hyperactive and inattentive. She was diagnosed in her early teens, and it was sort of an afterthought. She told me that her brother presented more of the stereotypical hyperactive boy symptoms and that so many people associate with ADHD. After he was tested, her parents thought, well, maybe Rachael should be tested too. Even after her diagnosis, Rachael was not so convinced.
I didn't actually think I had it. And actually that went all the way through my 20s up until maybe like 4 or 5 years ago when I realized I might be like the poster child for it, when I had a better understanding of what ADHD was. And it's funny because I used to just think like, oh no, I'm like a head in the clouds kind of person. I'm just like artsy and creative and my class is boring. Why would I want to pay attention? I'd much rather just like live in my head or doodle on my notebooks. You know, I did well in school. And so I think that like, I was like, I don't think I have this. I was medicated and I found the Adderall that I've been on for many, many years to be helpful with like waking up and getting other things in my life done. And so I was like, well, if they want to give this to me because they think I have this thing, sure, this works for me. Only to later in my 20s have a therapist who also had ADHD and had done like a bunch of their like dissertation in that field and would like point out different things to me that I was saying. And she would be like, oh, that's an ADHD trait, or that's really common in this. And like, it was in such a relatable way that I was like, oh, damn.
Rachael pointed out that ADHD involves low or dysregulated dopamine levels compared to non-ADHD folks, and that can play out in a bunch of different ways. One is time and task management.
people with ADHD, they don't have enough dopamine to like get them to do the thing.
The thing they don't want to do, even if it's super important.
And so where a neurotypical person would be like, oh, cool, I have like 5 things to do. I got to pay this bill. I need to walk the dog. I need to do the dishes and, whatever else it might be. People with ADHD don't have like the dopamine that actually gets you to get up and go do that thing. And so we're often really seeking dopamine.
I relate to this as an ADHD person myself. The medication that helps Rachel have get up and go and get things done keeps me out of severe anxiety and depression. It often settles my brain down and it even helps me sleep. Everyone's a little different. ADHD can also make long-term monogamous relationships either way more ideal and feasible, like the best thing for you, or not a good option for you at all. For me, multiple romantic relationships would be super overwhelming. For Rachel, it helps. Still, she has learned to take caution around a particular aspect of that.
I'm polyamorous, meaning that I have multiple relationships in my life, but I, prior to that, was in a long-term monogamous relationship. And my partner and I decided in like maybe 2016, 2017 to open up our marriage and to start seeing other people as well. And it's been really great, but I can definitely see very clearly how ADHD plays a role in things. And it's new. And so that it kind of both makes it clear, but also like new things are like ADHD candy and you want to chase after them a little bit. And seeing how things like NRE, like new relationship energy, that happy buzz you get when you start dating somebody new and you're really into them, how that can be perhaps problematic if you feel that for every new person you date, but you have long-term partners you care about deeply, trying to like balance their needs versus like your desire to just spend all the time feeling happy and full of dopamine.
She's also seen how a lack of a sense of time and time management challenges associated with ADHD, how they impact sex and dating.
When you live with somebody and they're around all the time, even if you super want to have sex with them and it's fun, suddenly it's always available in a way. You find it hard to prioritize that over the other things that you may need to get done that may have a strict timeline or are causing you more stress or whatever. And so next thing you know, you're like, yeah, well, give me 15 more minutes. Give me 20 more minutes. I just need to finish this up. And next thing you know, it's like 2 a.m. and your partner's fallen asleep 3 hours ago. As a night person, I end up in that one more often than I probably should.
Whatever kind of brain you have, it impacts sex hugely. If yours is of the ADHD variety, fantasy and hyperfocus might fall among your biggest bedroom strengths. Also back in 2020, I talked to sex therapist Dr. Megan Fleming about this.
Where there's a focus on something that's of interest, it's kind of hyper interest and hyper focused for those with ADHD. So honestly, for many, sex is the one place that their mind can kind of quiet down, so to speak, because they're super focused either on the sensation and or fantasy. Fantasy can be a huge piece of their turn on. And so if they know how to use that with their partner and be sort of talking out loud and sharing that fantasy with their partner, it's a real sense of, instead of the distractibility, that ability to truly feel your partner with you. I think that can bring a lot of intimacy to a couple. And then I think it depends on the dynamics of the relationship. But if fantasy is an important piece of it, sex is actually a really great place for them to be truly turning themselves on. Because if your partner isn't present in sex, honestly, I hear this a lot, most people would really prefer to masturbate. To be honest, just doesn't really feel good to be in the presence of somebody, is just sort of in their head or going through the motions.
People with ADHD can be so overwhelmed by distractions like certain aromas or sounds or sensations or thoughts that sex isn't very appealing at all. And even though, as Dr. Megan pointed out, sex is present bringing for some folks, it goes the opposite way for others.
For some people, trying to shut everything else out can become a source of anxiety for them too. And that can be like a deterrent from wanting to have sex in the future. And after a while, that can change your interest in sex in a larger way, even when it was a small thing to begin with. There's so many people who feel like if they can't focus during sex, they're doing something wrong. They're bad. Their partners will maybe accuse them of not being as into it. And like it builds up all this shame. It like breaks my heart a little bit because it's just how your brain is wired. And there's not anything wrong with it. It's just different.
It's so true. And I think knowing that we can experience pleasure while our brains are bouncing all over the place. Just giving ourselves that permission, I think, can be really important because you're so right. I mean, how many times do we hear, like, what's your top sex tip? slow down, be mindful, focus on the present. And I'm like, now I want to do jumping jacks and run around in circles.
People will be like, oh, you should just meditate and it'll help you be more mindful. And I'm like, meditation makes me anxious. It stresses me out. I'm like, okay, I've got to find somewhere to meditate. I got to block off a whole chunk of time for this. Okay, so now I'm just laying here listening to some person with a relatively soothing voice speak at me. Well, honestly, I'm just making grocery lists and like to-do lists in my head. So I think trying to do that during sex just feels like patting your head and rubbing your belly at the same time. And it feels more overwhelming than it does pleasurable to try to relax rather than just be yourself in the moment.
And sometimes being yourself in the moment during sex invites some funny happenings.
I will have, especially with my very long-term partner, like I'll remember something I was supposed to tell him earlier in the day, or worse, like a really bad dad joke or something like that like I just like feel like I need to tell him immediately, but we're in the middle of having sex and I know that is wildly inappropriate.
Like this one time.
There was a TV show on E! Several years ago called The Soup, but there was this one segment called Chat Stew. The opening sound, it was some graphic and a woman's voice going, so meaty. It became this running joke with my partner because we would watch it. At one point, we were like, we've been joking about it like a couple of days earlier or whatever, and I was going down on him. Couldn't stop myself, and I was like, so meaty. And we burst out laughing. Like, I mean, it became a whole funny joke. I could never have sex with somebody who couldn't laugh at that kind of thing. Clearly a very mature human. Other times were like, if you have music playing in the background while you have sex, I feel like I need to have sex to the rhythm and it like throws me off if we're not on beat. I never really gravitated toward this like idea where people are like super serious and passionate and intense, but like you can't laugh at things. Sex like that would never work for me because that's not how my brain works. And I just find people who appreciate it the way that I do. So I think that works.
Emily shared a practice for you all to consider. She said it can be really helpful if you or your partner are a neuroqueer person, or even to help define sex and make sure partners have a sense of what will happen and what to expect during a sexual experience. It's basically exploring 3 questions.
So question number 1 would be, what are you hoping to get out of this sexual encounter? So are you looking specifically for pleasure? Are you looking for intimacy or physical connection? Literally, like, what are you looking for in this moment? Why do you even want to have sex? Question number 2 would be, what can I do to help you achieve this? So if you were looking for an orgasm, is there a way that maybe you want to be touched? Or is there a sex toy that you prefer to use that you know will help you get there? If you're looking for intimacy, do you want to be in a certain position? Or what would feeling intimate even look like to you? Or maybe you're looking to have your gender affirmed in some way, and how can I be affirming with you? And then question number 3 is, if you feel like you need to stop sex for whatever reason, because that can be a hard and scary thing to do. And honestly, I think even more so for people who are neurodivergent with like feelings of potentially like stirring up some RSD, how would you like to communicate that? So do you want to use a safe word or signal or a certain phrase to kind of just time out? Because like I've said with Emily and I, we've had to sometimes be in the moment where we have to just check in with each other and time out. So how do you want to signal that to each other? And then if you're stopping because you're dysregulated in any sort of way, do you have any guidance that I can do to support you through that? Because like everyone's going to have different needs, both emotionally and physically. I think it's hard sometimes assuming that someone needs a certain something. Like, for example, like when Emily would run out of the room before, like my first instinct was to go run after her, but I assumed that, right? I didn't actually check in with her first. And so by not doing that, like that could have actually made the dysregulation a whole lot worse for her or made it feel more intense. So by figuring out what that looks like for you and your partner, I think it gives you like a plan for if and when something dysregulating would happen. And you can both feel just a little bit more confident knowing that you're doing what's right for you. And hopefully no one's getting any feelings hurt or anything like that either.
To learn more from Emily Zawadski, Rachael Rose, and Dr. Megan Fleming, check out the links in the show notes. Download Emily's free workbook, Redefining Sex and Communication as a Neuroqueer, at emilyzsexed.com/newsletter. If you enjoyed this Girl Boner Radio episode, I would so appreciate a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can also support the show and a friend or two by sharing links you think they'd like. In fact, why don't you just text it over right now? It would mean a lot to me, and I hope it helps them. Thank you so much for listening.